I'm pretty sure if you would run a model on me that I would be seen as an outlier because I'm not a data scientist. I'm very interested in the topic, but I've always been on the business side. And actually, it's quite late already, so we're going to do a little experiment also in the session. But does anybody know of you what's on the left side on that screen, that pretty device? Can I see a hand? Oh, great, I'm not the only one. Excellent. So that was my first computer. It's a Sinclair ZX81. I bought it in 81. I was 15 years old, and it had 1 kilobyte of RAM. And if you had a full screen, you had 350 bytes left or so to program. So this was really taught me a big lesson about simplicity. How can you actually get simplicity in the system? And my interest then in that very cheap device, I think 200 euros, the first affordable one for a young kid, actually led me to go and do electrical engineering in Eindhoven, in the Netherlands. That's where this strange accent comes from, I guess. And after my study, I worked in many companies, mainly telecoms, and I've always been busy with how can you apply technology for the customers of those companies, or how can you get the companies in the next phase if these technologies start to disrupt the current business. And I picked a random slide, as many, but if you go for random buzzwords on the internet, I'm sure you see them too. I think particularly blockchain is a little bit hyped. We had a very interesting discussion on it last night over dinner. But still, I would say, from all these words, AI, artificial intelligence, blockchain, and the Internet of Things, they are real. And they start to manifest themselves. And what you actually see is that there's very successful companies now coming to play in markets where typically traditional companies like I've worked for, have been present and quite dominant. And when I worked at Vodafone, for example, this was from 2008 till 2012. First we had Apple coming in Europe in 2007, I think. And then WhatsApp came in 2008, 2009. And I can still remember what they did to the business, because texting was a very profitable business for telcos in those days, 25 cents per message. And then WhatsApp came in, and they just totally disrupted that market. And if there was one market, of course, that a telco could have owned, is texting. But it was such a nice profit pool, so everybody was sitting with their bottoms on that nice profit pool, and it just vaporized in probably 5-6 months, gone. And you see the same also in banking. It's less so because it's more regulated, but there's also very nice profit pools in credit risk, and they come with different risk models based on social profiling, giving loans to SME companies in 10 minutes rather having to go through a 4-week cycle and all that stuff. So I think the business is understanding very well now that you can no longer ignore the technology. And it has to start at the top. And that's how I've always worked. I also had my own businesses in between. But what's very important, I think, for these type of transformations is that there's a leadership in place, a CEO or a board that actually understands, and we want to go that way. So, for example, in ING, Ralph Hamers, our CEO, he's very clear. He said, we're a tech firm with a banking license. Reality is still a little bit different, but that's where it's heading. And also in Vodafone, they were very clear, we are operating in 24 countries. We want to be a global player. We don't want to have 24 different networks. We want to have one network that you can access in one way, and actually everybody, wherever they are, can consume the services. So real leadership changes are needed then. And I think the top 3 for me are, how do you move from hierarchies to networks? It's a big thing, because all the people in the company, they've gone through the ranks. They are very successful. They have big jobs, big salaries. And traditionally, a lot of them is, of course, managed through the hierarchy. It's also from controlling to empowering. I think it's a big trend. In ING, I've also driven the global transformation for Agile, where you actually, for bankers, it's quite scary, first of all, to take off their tie, and then secondly, to actually get out of their office and talk to people on the floor. But we pushed it very much. Again, it was led from the top. And we said, look, if we want to be successful and keep on attracting the right talents, we have to change the way we work and start to empower the teams much more in front of the customer. And also the planning to experimentation. I think that's a big one too. How do you actually create viable or minimal viable products with your customers, test it, if it's successful, then think about scaling and really focus on the business impact. And there's one other big thing that all these large corporates suffer from or benefit from, and that's what we call legacy. And legacy, there's lots of words around legacy. That's, it's ugly, it's whatever, but typically in any corporate or a large organization, legacy is what a business runs on, so you can't ignore it. It's typically very distributed, it's very old-fashioned in a lot of cases. It has to do with the systems, of course, the processes, the products, everything. And I'm a big fan of Einstein, as you can understand perhaps if you studied electrical engineering, but I think this is so true. And you might come along in that too when you're talking to colleagues or to, hopefully not to friends, that they make things very complex and not really addressing the issues. And for me, that's always a sign, hey, there's no clarity. Can be that there's no clear accountabilities, can be that people actually you're talking to don't really understand and they're afraid to speak up, etc., etc. So, and I've learned that, if you want to go fast, if you really want to get speed into your transformation, you have to standardize and you have to simplify. When I worked at Vodafone, for example, when Apple came with the iPhone, we had 24 local markets, UK, but everywhere, India, New Zealand, 24 in total. And it was built by entrepreneurial CEOs. So they all, whenever you went there and say, we want to standardize, the answer was, my market is different. Huh? And so I always use the example there that if Apple would have been Vodafone, then Apple would have launched 24 different iPhones, one swiping right-left, the other top-down, the other left-right, the other at the back, some iPhones without a screen, and just to prove the point that, the customer behavior is changing. It is very much possible if you want to go fast and grow and expand, you have to standardize around your service. And then when WhatsApp came in later, it was obviously very clear. But to prove my point, we're now going to do a little bit of an experiment. And I need your support for this, otherwise I look like a total jerk. So what we have to do is very simple. If you can just mention the color that you see on the screen, but the challenge to all of us is that we do it at the same time. Yeah, I'll be clicking the button. So what's this? Orange. All right, here we go. Orange. Very, very simple, yeah? Difficult? No? Okay, let's do it again. 1, 2, 3. It's impossible. It's a mess, yeah? So, point taken. So this is, of course, I'm talking to data scientists here, so of course you can translate this to data, I get that. And this is probably your daily job. This is where you spend 80% of your time, I understand from the previous presentations. But this is also true for business practices. If you're dealing, and I've been dealing with that a lot, with the CEOs of a country who run the country as if it's their own business, they will say, Walter, you can say it's orange, but it's really black. You don't understand. You're not from Germany. You're not from Vietnam, wherever the countries around the world. So rather than ending up in all these discussions, who's right or who, the right of the strongest or whatever, the big trick, and I think the big solution, it's not a trick, it's how normal business runs, is don't go and have all these debates, but really involve the customer. And let the customer say it's orange, or it's black, or it's green. And then if you then actually test that solution with the customers, and it starts to manifest itself, and then you can really scale. Because the only way out, and I've seen it in Vodafone, I've seen it in ING, is that you move from all these different local ways of working, you move to a platform environment which is global, which is on the net, where you're competing with, the Googles and whatever, is to standardize. And standardizing not to take out cost, that's another benefit, but mainly to standardize to go at speed. Because if you all sing from the same hip, if that's correct English, then you go much faster. And I think the little demo showed it. And it's, I think it's the only way out, because in my view, it's no longer the big wins from the small companies, it's the fast companies win from the slow companies. That's really what it is. And the additional challenge then, and that's always very much difficult to fix, how do you keep your existing business growing? Because the good thing about these large corporates is that they already have a lot of customers. They are used, so you have your branding. How do you keep that going whilst also innovating and putting AI into your processes? And of course, and again, I'm not going to touch on this a lot, but believe me, also in ING, also in Vodafone, there's a lot of experimentation that went on with different technology, chatbots, all the good stuff we saw today with H2O, with others, with IBM. how can we innovate, how can we use different technologies to actually change the way we work. But what's really, really, really important is that it's not about testing the technology, because that's why we have technology companies for. It's actually how do you create the business impact. So when I look at AI, I actually say AI is a tool or software, whatever it is, that helps our teams or our customers, to get more out of the service or out of the job or whatever the situation is. And it's really about how do you complement what people are really good at. So the human nature, the abilities, the real intelligence compared to artificial intelligence. And of course, how can you really get rid of the routine or the stuff that people are less good in? So really see artificial intelligence as complementary to teams, as another employee in the team. And I think this Gartner picture shows it well. So that's also why I rather talk about applied intelligence. So it's still AI, so that works. But it's actually you add it to your teams, and then you let your teams work with the support of the algorithms or of whatever it is. And whilst working, the mundane task, the routine goes away. They train the models, the model gets better and better, and you no longer have to even present it to the people. And as long as you're in a growing business, people can start to do the real jobs. And we have some use cases for that, which we're going to touch on now. So that's really how I position it. That's also how we rolled it out. I think that's the only way to not make it too threatening, to really see, okay, a team, it's about team performance. There's no point having a team of 10 data scientists that are more or less the same. They get a long way, but you need the different styles in there, the promoter, the builder, the innovator. You need these types and support them with the right tooling and make it real teamwork. So how do you start a change journey like that in these large corporates? It's, I always say it's at your own personal risk, and I mean that in a good way. So I'm a change person by nature. I'm very impatient now and then, but when I typically work in 4 year stints or sprints or whatever, marathons, whatever they are, and you change it. And I personally think it's always very good that if you change or transform companies to a new situation, you're not going to be the leader of the new situation, because then it becomes very political. Everybody says, yeah, you're doing it to create your own job. So I always set it up in such a way that there's new teams that can then go and run it, and I'm actually out of a job. And as it happens now and then, that happens, and then I do my own business, but most of the times it doesn't. So these principles are very easy for me to say, because I've always worked like that, but I do see that it works across the world. I've worked in 28 different countries, and it really starts then to generate momentum. So there's always people, for example, that think they know better. Well, then please do, I say, and then let's look at the result. And that's actually what we faced when we introduced H2O into ING, where was a lot of the data scientists say, we don't need it, we can do much better. Great, give me a model, what was your performance, let's test it. And then let the data speak or the results speak, that works very well. No slides, but real deliverables, real minimal viable products that you can actually see working, rather than having discussions on what's meant by that letter type. Join if you want to contribute, particularly in the beginning. If you don't want to contribute, go away, basically. And then make sure you always create that data. And the last one, of course, is very important, the stakeholder management, because a lot of the large corporates, they suffer from the NISH syndrome. Anybody knows what it is? NISH syndrome? That's the not invented here syndrome. So any corporate you work in, and you must be seeing it too, if you have a great idea, then if they're not part of the process, there's always a lot of resistance. So managing your stakeholders, keeping them involved, make sure it's also they're part of the success. It's very, very, very important. So what use cases did we do in my last stint? These both are from ING. This is a picture from the Nederlandse Bank, the regulator in the Netherlands. So it's a publicly available picture, it's not ING. Basically what this is all around is about money laundering. And why do banks have to focus on money laundering? Because for financial economic crime, it's been legislated, it's in the local laws, and banks are supposed to watch the gate and actually see if black money or criminal money is coming into to the formal systems. And I heard it before, a needle looking in a haystack is difficult, but this is like needles looking in a needle, stack of needles, honestly. So of course you have the transaction itself, which is more and more going to real time. But it also, a lot of work is being done on post-transaction monitoring. So after the transaction, there's all kind of rule-based systems. Every bank has them. There's all kind of parameters in that systems, if, then, else. And then alerts come out. And then these alerts go to operators. And they look at the alert and they say, well, this looks normal, false alert. Or no, this could be a hit. And then it gets a real investigator on it and go to look at the case. And then if it's a real case, it gets reported to the financial institutes in the country. And we actually introduced H2O in this set. So Ashrit was, I'm not sure if Ashrit is in the room, but he did a great job at ING. And we really found a model, for example. Again, there was the normal resistance. Oh, we know what we're doing, go away, huh? That type of behavior. But we said, well, let's see. Huh? We might benefit from it. And I think the model that we now run is actually reducing in this mid-70s or so % reduction of false positives, meaning that the alerts the handlers are getting, they can spend much more time on a real investigation, so you get much better output of your process. And again, then this is great, the model is great, but then the real world starts in a bank. Of course, then we have the Department of Compliance who says, yeah, well, if I look at the law and can we really do this? So that's a couple of months gone. And then we have the regulator that then has to say, well, yeah, it's a little bit scary if you let software decide to move away alerts. What if there's a criminal in it, etc. So we've actually gone through all that process, and we can now bring that into production. So that's good. And the other one was actually much more around how do you engage your staff and your teams on knowledge? Because there's a lot of knowledge that bankers need to have, like FATCA, which is US regulation on tax, or yeah, there's so many regulations you won't believe it. But typically these are all very boring topics. Stuff, it's not like you're going in the evening, say, great, I have nothing to do, I'm going to read a book about FATCA. It's just, it's not exciting stuff. So how do you, but it's very relevant, if you want to be a tech firm with a banking license, that you keep your banking license. So how do you really engage the people across bank with these topics, with the knowledge and with each other? So we created a platform together with a company, Elephant Think. I'm not sure if Jack is in the room. I saw him, Jack Smith. And basically what we said is let's use concept of gamification, but also of setting a challenge, and also the bulletin boards. Let's start these discussions around, in this case we started around FATCA, but let's then also observe the behavior and the contribution of the individual. So we collect the data. We do the minutes no longer in rooms, but through bulletin boards. If we have presentations, we use questionnaires. So you always log the data of where people meet, and then you start to identify actually this expert that we have on FATCA or on whatever topic, is that really an expert, or is somebody in Singapore or in the US much more capable of being the expert? So you start really building these knowledge networks in your company, and also you start to see who contributes to what, etc. And in an offline mode, we experimented with H2O driverless AI. What I really like about it, when Sri demoed it to me, I think it was the beta version, a year or so ago, is that it has a dashboard. And it might sound very stupid, but executives, they love dashboards. So you must see it in your company too. So, and if you just show that dashboard, which I did, of course, to my board, and they said, look, what you see, they see these things going up and down. They have no clue what it is, but they love it. So I think when it comes to engaging senior stakeholders with your work, you need to start really thinking about how you bring that across. And we let them play with them too. I said, here's a model, go and do it. And you really bring it together. And I think when I saw driverless AI a year and a half or so ago, I said, Sri, if you can pull this one off, then I think that will really change the market. And it did. So that's basically what I did over the last 25 years or so. And I want to share with you a couple of the lessons learned, because it's a very strange problem. You have something that makes a lot of sense, the data tells it, but still there's a lot of resistance typically in organizations to really get on with it. And it really has to do with the first sentence, of course. There was an earlier comment on what's the process, but people are used to certain ways of working, and anything that typically comes in that's changed that way of working is just being seen as disruptive. So very, very important first phase is always to build that culture of trust, establish the relationship, be open for feedback, and also, take the input serious. I think the other very important point is, always start with the customer. Just start there, because then you have the great argument, which I had many times, saying, look, this is what the customer is telling they want us to do. You're saying you don't want to do it. Why not? Tell me. Do we stop listening to customers? Yes, of course. So they have to do it. And in that stream, you can introduce a lot of new ways of working, because in the end, everybody wants to do a better job for the customer or the people, depending on your challenge. Start small. So think big. Have a real dot in the horizon, but really do small projects. And that's also. Thank you very much, Josephine, for the T-shirt. I saw the T-shirt. Megan's going to make that. I think that's so important. Just make a viable product, show it, show the results, get the right stakeholders enthusiastic, and then up to the next one, up to the next one. I think that is really, really important. Business impact. Empower the teams. No slides. The validated learning. Again, we did that a lot in Vodafone. Every quarter we had 20 or so CIOs from around the world gathering together. We said, look, this is on our product roadmap. Here's what we think about. They gave input to it. We changed it a little bit. And in the new world, of course, you could do that with AI. Those days it wasn't possible. But you could just really drive the change from there. And I think the big challenge, but you're probably, if you work in a large company, you're probably aware of it, is that the availability of data is the real struggle, is what I've seen. So the real big impact, I would say, of AI in these large corporates is still to come. I do think that because they have such a great customer base, that there's a real advantage if they get that right. But there's a lot of plumbing in the back, and I see it in all the companies I've worked in, needed to actually fix that, and that just distracts from making short-term impact. So that's what I wanted to say. Thank you very much for your attention, and then I'll hand back to the MC. Thank you.